What's going on, everybody? I hope you all are enjoying this Super Bowl Sunday morning. So, we had some interesting news come out this morning in regards to our 49ers. It looks as though Deebo Samuel has requested a trade and has been granted permission by the team for he and his agent to seek a trade out. Now, this is very, very interesting to me because I have been on since probably mid-season on the train of Debo needs to go. And as the last video I put out said, when he decided to show up to Radio Row in AJ Brown Eagles jersey, kind of made it even more of a point that needed to be driven home this offseason to me. Now, now that it comes out that this request has been made, him showing up in that jersey makes even more sense to me now. It's Debo doing Debo things just like he did when he was a free agent and he wanted his contract and the things that he would do to kind of um I don't know, push the Niners over the edge to do that. It seems to me like, you know, Debo's not a dumb guy. Um and I'm fairly certain that he was well aware of the reaction that he would get by wearing an Eagles jersey as a member of the 49ers, both from the fans and I'm fairly confident in saying that there couldn't have been too many members of the organization that were pleased by him wearing an Eagles jersey. Um, Now that could be Debo in some ways, one supporting his friend, and I do truly believe that that had at least some part in why he did it. Um, but I think it was also a ploy for him to be able to basically almost make it a point of no return. I'll be interested to see how the rest of this offseason plays out until he is dealt, to see what other things he does and says and stuff like that. Because you get to a point where you take enough people off, be it fans, members of the organization, coaching staff, teammates, whatever the case may be, to where you almost have no option but to trade a player or cut a player, whichever the case is, almost regardless of what you get in return once they've burnt enough bridges. And so I feel like this is kind of step number two in Debo's journey of getting himself off of the San Francisco 49ers. So step number one is requesting the trade. So Debo made a statement to ESPN. The statement is, it was a hard conversation to have with Kyle because of the relationship that we have. Um, but I have to do what's best. I'm more than thankful for the Niners giving me the opportunity of a lifetime, but now I think it's best that we find another team. So that was step one. The actual request was step one. Um, Step two for Debo, in my opinion, was showing up to the Super Bowl in the Eagles jersey, to media row in the Eagles jersey. And step three, I guess, is putting this statement out there. So, with that all being said, what do we really honestly think Deebo Samuel is worth? As far as trade compensation goes, um, last offseason, I would say he was probably worth a lot more, and we could have got a higher package in return for him than we could this season. But you never know what other people or what other teams see in a player. Debo, it's pretty clear, still views himself as a upper echelon or top flight receiver. Um, Even though his production the last year, and I would go as far as to say the last couple years, hasn't lived up to that. But in his eyes, he is. Now, do other teams out there see him that way? That's hard to say. I doubt it, but there's all it takes is one. All it takes is one team, one coach, one GM, one owner, whatever it is, to see value in him. Now, that has to be balanced against the numbers on his contract if we're talking about a trade. I find a hard I find it hard to find a team that would be willing to take on that contract based on the production that he's been putting up lately. Now, that could all that's all in the eye of the beholder, I guess. So you can have another coach out there that sees Deebo and views him as being misused by the Niners. I don't know how you could possibly see that, because I think that the Niners probably are the one team that got the best or the most out of him, considering what his limitations are as a wide receiver. He has proven that he is not quite capable of running the ball like he did back in 2021. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. And I think that initially they're going to get out there and they're going to explore their options. And his agent is going to get out there and talk to teams. And I think they're going to find out that the value that he has in his mind doesn't necessarily match the value that other GMs and coaches have for him out there. And the one thing we know about the 49ers is they value their players quite a bit more than other teams do. We've seen this with Jimmy G. We've seen this with Deebo during his contract year. We've seen this with Brandon Ayuk last year. What they view their return should be for certain players is not what other teams see, what other coaches and GMs see. So it's going to be really interesting, and I have a feeling that what's happening, or what's going to happen, is that Debo and his agent are going to go out there and explore trade options, and they're going to find that he's not as coveted as he thinks he is, and the returns being offered for him are not going to meet the standards of the 49ers. So, with that being said, I would watch out for Debo employing more of these tactics, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, to try to push the 49ers into accepting whatever they can get for him. And, to be honest with you, I don't think that's a bad idea. Just from a 49ers fan standpoint, I think no matter what we get in return, at this point, even if we cut him, it's addition by subtraction, in my opinion. His production does not match his contract. It just doesn't. And it's time for this organization, for this team, to turn the page on the Debo era. And I think that, you know, a team to watch out there for a potential Debo trade, and it's gonna be tricky, because the team I have in mind doesn't have a plethora of draft assets and stuff to trade. So it would be a tricky deal, but one team that I would watch, and I have no idea if Debo would be interested in a place like this. I have no idea if Debo's never given any kind of inclination that he'd want to go here. It's just the coach that is there is a coach that might actually be able to get something out of Debo, and that team is the Chicago Bears. Now, I say this because if there's one thing that Debo could potentially still be used for, it's gimmicky stuff. It's trick plays. It's, you know, um, things that are not just lining up as a wide receiver and being asked to beat man coverage. It's not just being able to run crisp routes and getting yourself open. No team that has that in mind for Debo, in my opinion, is going to be very successful. So I believe not successful with him. So I believe that he's going to need to go to a team that has a coach that is very creative, that has different ways of getting receivers involved in many different ways. Now, Chicago doesn't have the strongest run game, and maybe Ben Johnson feels like Debo can help in that regard. And we all know that Ben Johnson is like the king of misdirection. He is the king of trick plays and drawing up stuff that people didn't see coming. And I think if there's anything that Debo is, besides a kick returner in today's NFL, it's that. He's a gimmicky player. He's a gimmick receiver, running back, whatever you want to call it. Now, as far as what the Bears have to offer as far as trade compensation goes, Now, they've made a lot of trades lately, and they don't have a lot of draft picks. They have the first round pick number 10. We all know they're not trading that for Deebo. They have 2 second round picks, number 40 and 42. I find it very, very, very hard to believe that they would trade either of those picks for Deebo as well. Now, here's where it gets a little bit more interesting. They do have a third round pick. Now, I do believe that Deebo um, was getting interest for a third round pick during last year's draft. I believe I don't remember the team. And so I don't know that a team would be willing to offer that same pick again this year, being that he's a year older and his production had significantly fallen off this year compared to it was the year prior. But I don't know if maybe you give Debo to Chicago and, like, let's say a fifth. Would Chicago then be willing to give you the third round pick for him? I don't know. Chicago does not have a fourth round pick. They do have a fifth round pick. They might be willing to offer that for Debo, but would the Niners take that? Maybe they offer a fifth round pick in this year's draft and a fourth round pick in next year's draft. I don't know. But anyway, Chicago, if they really want him, they can make it happen. They can do something. They can make something happen. If a team wants a player bad enough, usually they can find a way to make it happen. Now, you got to remember, Chicago was pretty loaded up at the wide receiver position last year, with DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, and Keenan Allen. But Keenan Allen is a free agent. He's also older than Debo, and he also wasn't productive last year. Um, and Keenan Allen doesn't really, in my opinion, fit Ben Johnson's offensive philosophy too well, where a guy like Debo does fit a little bit better. Now, Ben Johnson's creative enough where he could make almost anybody fit, but I think Debo is a better fit. He's a little bit younger, and for as many injuries as Debo has had, he's not as injury prone as Keenan Allen is. So I would watch out for the Bears. I just think that that's a good fit. It's a coach that is creative enough to use a guy like Debo. Another team could be Washington, and how funny would that be? Because that's where Brandon Ayuk wanted to go. But I could see Washington because Cliff is very creative, and I think Debo playing with a quarterback similar to or Jaden Daniels, being Jaden Daniels, I think that would unlock things for Debo, make things a little bit easier for Debo. Imagine, running RPOs with Jaden Daniels and either Brian Robinson or, Austin Eckler and Deebo Samuel. You know, and an offense like that could be a little bit more dangerous. Plus, you got familiarity with Peters in Washington. So that's another team maybe, and they got loads of cap space. They could definitely take on Debo's contract, um, extend him, rework it, whatever the case is, to even, lower the cap number. I really don't know if Peters would be interested in him, but those are the two teams. And Kingsbury, he can be a little bit creative, probably not to the same extent of Ben Johnson, but I do believe that he would be able to use Debo in a way that would make the most sense. Other than that, I don't see a lot of teams out there that have there's a lot of teams with wide receiver needs, but a team to expect Debo to go in there and be their number one, even the even their number two wide receiver, just I feel like you're setting your team up to fail. And I would say that there's teams out there that are probably smarter than that. So the two teams I'm going to look out for is Chicago and Washington. Um, and see how that goes. Washington has plenty of assets. They have plenty of cap space. Chicago, um, they can make it work if they really want to. I feel like there is some form of draft compensation, just by pairing picks, and even the Niners throwing in pick swaps and stuff like that. They could make it work if they want to. But I do believe that Debo is going to set his trail on fire this offseason. So when he gets out there and finds that the return compensation is not necessarily what he or the 49ers want it to be, I believe he's gonna blaze a path that makes it so the Niners have to almost accept anything. Um, and I think he's already kind of started down that path, and the first thing to doing that was showing up to Media Row in that Eagles jersey. So it will be definitely interesting to see how the rest of this offseason plays out. I am definitely going to be keeping a keen eye on Deebo Samuel's social media platforms and his podcast, although I find it to be quite boring. But I'm very curious to see how this goes. I expect all of this to be resolved by the draft. I don't think it'll go past that. In fact, in all honesty, I really do think that the Niners would like to get the Brock Purdy situation and the Deebo Samuel situation handled fairly quickly. And I am hoping that they have learned from past mistakes and they take care of this stuff right away. Um, and we can go from there. It just another thing that kind of is interesting to me is that all these rumors coming out that Devontae Adams is all of a sudden potentially interested in the 49ers, along with the Chargers and the Rams. But when you think about that and then you hear about, because these guys talk, players talk, it's maybe new to us that Debo requested a trade, um, but it may not be new to his peers in the NFL. Devontae Adams might know that Debo might be on his way out of there, and Brandon Ayuk is not going to probably return until midseason at the earliest. So, um, definitely interesting. And this offseason is getting off to a very interesting start so far, and I expect that to continue. So, guys, that's the video for now. I hope you all enjoy the game. I hope both teams lose. Don't know how that's going to happen, but I will talk to you all soon. Have a good weekend, everybody.